This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hamas issues ultimatum to Israel after Israeli-Palestinian clashes in Jerusalem. IGAD says South Sudan faces the worst food security crisis in recent years. And Libya's 5+5 military commission takes first step to create a joint military task force. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, and joining me with the business headlines is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Zimbabwe to increase local medicine production from under 20% to 60% in 5 years. And Egypt to build the largest petrochemicals plant in the region in the Red Sea Economic Zone. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. We begin the hour in Nigeria, where 30 people have drowned after an overloaded boat capsized in Niger State. 5 passengers are still missing, while 65 others have been rescued. The boat, ferrying 100 local traders, split into 2 after hitting a stump during a windstorm as they were returning from a market on Saturday. Boat capsizes are common in Nigerian waterways because of overcrowding and lack of maintenance, particularly in the annual rainy season. Let's bring in CGTN's Phil has live for us in Abuja for more on this. Phil, can you give us an update on this incident?
Well, thank you. What we know is that rescue operations are still ongoing. It's been on since the weekend when the incident happened. So at the moment, 5 people are still missing, 30 have been confirmed dead, and about 65 have been rescued, which is according to the president, who has commended the emergency services and of course the divers. He sees the rescue effort so far as very commendable, and also urged the policing the waterways of the policing the waterways now by authorities and officials to actually step up and increase so that we can prevent further accidents or incidents like this. You know, it's a rainy season, and therefore the waterways the water levels are higher, the currents are more, and more than ever before, it's expected that security operatives are supposed to maintain proper, ethics in traveling on Nigeria's waterways, and that's what a lot of authorities are saying. That's what also the president is saying in terms of life jackets, for example, because this accident would have been reduced. The casualties, for example, would have been reduced to the barest minimum if all that was necessary was done. But that's we're monitoring to see if the other 5 people missing will be found by the rescue operations, which is still ongoing by the locals and of course the state emergency services.
Okay, Phil, thank you for that update. Phil has live in Abuja. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, clashes have broken out between Palestinian protesters and Israeli police for a 4th day in a row. The Palestinian Red Crescent said more than 300 protesters were injured in the violence which took place at a holy site that's been a flashpoint for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israeli security forces responded with stun grenades, tear gas and rubber bullets as the protesters hurled rocks. Tensions have intensified as Israel marked Jerusalem Day to celebrate the capture of the eastern part of the city in 1967. In 1980, Israel annexed Palestinian-occupied East Jerusalem, a move that has never been recognized by the international community. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged Israel to show restraint. The UN Security Council held a closed-door meeting earlier on the issue. All right, so Stephanie Freed is live for us now in Jerusalem for more on this developing story. Stephanie, give us an update on the situation.
Well, you know, the events that you were describing, the violent clashes that happened at Islam's third holiest site, Al-Aqsa Mosque, 300 injured, 21 police, 300 Palestinians injured, 21 police officers injured. That happened this morning, Monday morning, and this is a fast moving developments in what is nearly a crisis in Jerusalem and throughout Israel and in the occupied territories. The latest that we have now, this evening, hours later, is that a few hours ago from Gaza, a number of rockets were launched at Jerusalem. 7 rockets, in fact. 1 was intercepted, 1 reportedly landed in West Jerusalem, and then since that time, a few hours ago, dozens of rockets have been fired from Gaza into southern Israel. The shooting of rockets onto Jerusalem marks an escalation because it's a different strategy, it's a different tactic as far as the rocket firing goes, and Israel sees it as such. In retaliation for the constant barrage of rocket fire that's been coming from Gaza toward Israel, Israel carried out airstrikes on Gaza, getting reports that 9 people were killed in those airstrikes. Israel's security cabinet is meeting, talking about what their decision will be going forward, what they will do in response to this escalation, firing rockets at Gaza beyond airstrikes. Israel's military spokesperson said, all cards are on the table, all options are on the table. This does represent a significant change, firing rockets at Jerusalem, and those options, according to the spokesperson, could include a ground invasion.
So, Stephanie, the nationalist march in Jerusalem has reportedly been cancelled. Can you confirm this, and is it likely to calm the situation?
Well, the march went ahead. It was rerouted. It was supposed to go right about where I am, which heads right through the Muslim quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. Highly provocative, specifically because tensions have been so high. There's been so much violence in Jerusalem. And this march is Jews, Israelis who are in favor of Israel controlling occupied areas, Palestinian areas of East Jerusalem. It was rerouted to abate some of that tension. When the air raid sirens went off here in Jerusalem, marking rocket fire from Gaza, the march was stopped temporarily and then restarted. Will it abate the tensions? It's hard to say. Specifically vis-a-vis Gaza, apparently not right now because rockets continue to be fired on Israel. Also, some of the issues, the underlying issues that have created all of this tension, including pending forced eviction of Palestinians from their homes to make way for Jewish settlers, that's still on the table, as they say. So right now, not necessarily will the tension abate. Right here behind me, this is the quietest it's been here in this area for days, for weeks, after the breakfast Ramadan iftar meal. And that's because when rockets were fired on Jerusalem, the security forces moved in, cleared everyone out of this area because there was a concern that there would be chaos in the wake of rockets and then violence and clashes. So it's quiet for the time being, but again, this situation is very fluid.
Indeed, Stephanie, we appreciate that update. Thank you very much for joining us. Stephanie Fried live in Jerusalem. Now, Palestinian authorities are accusing Israel of horrific violations in and around the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They're calling on the international community to immediately intervene to protect Palestinians, especially in Jerusalem, which they say is undergoing ethnic cleansing. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he backed the security forces and extremists were trying to curtail Israelis' freedom to worship. The Secretary General of the United Nations urged Israeli police to exercise restraint and expressed concern over Israel's plan to expel Palestinians from a neighborhood in Jerusalem. The UN Security Council has called an urgent meeting to discuss the crisis. Now, one of the reasons for the protests in Jerusalem is the Israeli plan to expel Palestinians from their homes in the district of Sheikh Jarrah. It's part of a decades-long Israeli effort to consolidate its seizure of East Jerusalem. CGTN's Brian Dorman looks at some of the history.
Today's forecast, always sunny.
Sunny Jerusalem. These videos are from Israel's Ministry of Tourism. But behind the flash and glamour lies a complicated history. Today, Jerusalem is a divided city. Both Israel and the Palestinian Authority claim the city as their capital. But Jerusalem's legal status has been the subject of international debate for over 5 decades.
Entitled Status of Jerusalem.
In 1967, Israel fought what it calls the Six-Day War, seizing the east of the city from its rival Jordan.
Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Levi Eshkol must be the proudest man in the world.
Caught in the confusion, Palestinian families who lived in the area since the 1950s. Jordan's top diplomat says at that time, the United Nations made an agreement with the Jordanian government to house refugees who had been expelled from their traditional neighborhoods when the State of Israel was being formed. According to an Israeli NGO, the Civic Coalition for Palestinian Rights in Jerusalem, once Israel occupied the West Bank, authorities made it a point to transform occupied Palestinian East Jerusalem into a predominantly Jewish Israeli city. And in 1973, a group of ministers known as the Gaffney Committee drew up urban development plans with a strict demographic balance in mind. Critics call these and other Israeli policies discriminatory. But since virtually no progress has been made on the Jerusalem issue, Palestinians living in East Jerusalem remain victims of the status quo. Brian Dorman, CGTN.
The army in the Democratic Republic of Congo says it has killed 10 rebels of the Allied Democratic Forces in an offensive in the east of the country. The offensive occurred on Sunday in North Kivu province, just days after the government imposed a state of siege. Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
Congolese troops say they clashed with the rebels in Halungupa area near the DRC's eastern territory of Beni. The army spokesperson says they killed 10 rebels of the Allied Democratic Forces in the fighting. The ADF is an Islamist rebel group that's originally from neighboring Uganda. Its fighters are accused of killing more than 1,000 civilians in eastern DRC since 2019. The U.S. government designated it as a terrorist organization earlier this year because of its links to Islamic State. The killing of the rebels comes days after the DRC president imposed a state of siege in Ituri and North Kivu provinces in a bid to end attacks against civilians. The east of the DRC is rich in mineral resources. The UN says the illegal exploitation of minerals has fueled conflict there for more than 2 decades. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
13 minutes into the hour, this is Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. IGAD says South Sudan faces the worst food security crisis in recent years. And Libya's 5+5 military commission takes first step to create a joint military task force.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Somalia, floods have displaced hundreds of people and destroyed large areas of farmland of newly sown crops. This comes after the Shabelle River burst its banks in the villages of Bari and Moiko near the city of Johar. Johar is on the verge of being submerged as the road between the town and the airport has been cut off. The floods come from Ethiopian highlands, although these regions experienced a shortage of rains since the beginning of the current spring season. The flooding of the Shabelle River has also destroyed hundreds of hectares of arable land for sesame, maize and vegetables in the region. Floods hit the riverine regions of the Shabelle River every year, causing displacement and food insecurity.
The floods have caused a lot of damage and displacements. Many villages have been evacuated, many farms have been destroyed, and now the whole town is under siege. There is no place for our livestock, vegetables and crops, and the road between the city and the airport is cut off.
Today, the central town of Johar is on the verge of the huge floods. Now the flood is flowing to Kulut village east of Johar town, and then it will likely hit a lake on the sides of Isnai farms. And the farms will rebound after hitting the lake, and it will hit back the city. So we urge the administration of the city to take the necessary precautions to control the water. The floods damaged a lot of our crops we recently planted. We're facing food insecurity. I have lost 2 farms, a potato and vegetable farms.
Meanwhile, South Sudan is facing one of the worst food security crises globally. This is according to the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. A report by its Food Security and Nutrition Working Group says that an estimated 7.2 million people, which is 60% of the country's population, are expected to face acute food shortages between now and July. The report released on Monday also says conflict and widespread flooding are the key drivers of food scarcity in the country. IGAD is also concerned that despite the dire situation on the ground, the humanitarian response remains largely underfunded. South Sudan is still emerging from the ruins of a civil war, with President Salva Kiir dissolving parliament on Sunday to pave the way for the appointment of lawmakers from formerly warring parties in the country. Now, Meshach Malo is the FAO representative for South Sudan. He joins us live for more on this story. Moses, IGAD projects that some counties face a famine-likely situation. Is this the case? And what are the drivers of food insecurity in South Sudan?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me in this show. For sure, South Sudan is facing a famine-likely situation due to a number of factors. First is the protracted crisis that has been in this country, and this has prevented the populations and the people from taking advantage of particularly the main rainy season and the dry season that response could provide food. As all of us know, South Sudan is a country that is blessed with good water, good soils, but the protracted crisis has prevented its citizens from taking advantage of the available natural resources. Secondly, there's been conflict around the country, and this has affected some areas that are even the breadbasket of the country, like the areas of central Equatoria. This has conspired during the conflict time with the times for the main planting season, and agriculture is a very time-sensitive event. If you miss the May planting season, the next you could not be in a position to plant. Also, as we are also aware, flooding affected a good portion of the country. And so a number of factors were able to conspire negatively and affected the production in the country.
So there is concern that the humanitarian response remains largely underfunded. What are some of the challenges your organization is facing in dealing with the situation?
Yes, it's been a tough year for the humanitarian community because also COVID came in. A number of countries that have been supporting South Sudan, particularly the Western countries, were equally affected by, or even more affected by COVID-19. This has seen a decline in funding in virtually all agencies. For instance, the Food and Agriculture Organization, we support about 5.2 million farmers. This year, with the funding that we've been able to receive, it's barely enough to support half of that. So that affects a lot of factors. For instance, because of the poor agricultural production here, we import seeds virtually from about 5 countries: Italy, South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya. These are quite costly events, transportation, and so the funds that are needed in order to bring in supplies and even food is not there. So this is quite important to ensure that lives are able to be saved.
But this is a situation South Sudan has faced before. So what long-term measures need to be put in place to deal with the problem of food insecurity in the country?
As I've said in the opening, fortunately, South Sudan is a country that the natural resource base, and particularly land, water, and soil, is in plenty. So one of the most important things that needs to be done is that the country needs to produce its own food. Last year, due to the peace process, the country was able to produce about 800,000 metric tons of food, but they need 1.4 million. So peace is the most fundamental thing that this country needs. And secondly, is massive investment to ensure that the country is able to produce its own food and exit from food aid.
All right, Meshach, thank you very much for that. Meshach Malu joining us via Zoom from Juba. Libya's 5+5 military commission has taken the first step to create a joint military task force by appointing its commanding officers. The mission of the task force will be to secure the country's main coastal road and maintain security in the buffer zone in central Libya. The 5+5 commission is a UN-sponsored negotiation track that includes military leaders representing rebel forces. Here's Adel Mahri with more details.
Libya's 5+5 military commission's latest round of talks announced that it took the first step to form a joint military task force. It named the commanding officers of that task force, which will be the first security body to include rival troops from eastern and western Libya.
The mission of this task force is to replace the armed forces and the militia that are standing and should withdraw from the front lines in Sirte. It will form divisions to take over the security of the coastal road, which extends from Tripoli to Sirte. Overall, the security of the central Libyan region is the prime task for these new forces.
Vital details like how big this joint task force is and what kind of arms it will have to access is yet to be agreed upon. So far, it'll be a small power that neither the Eastern Libyan National Army, the Western military, or even the unity government manages.
The 5+5 military commission is responsible for managing the joint military task force. It determines the powers given to these forces and the assignments it's responsible for. The Presidency Council has no authority over that force. The council is moving in parallel to unify the Libyan army and is kind of an advisor who is monitoring the talks, making sure they don't go out of control.
The 5+5 military commission agreed to speed up the reopening of the coastal road. Currently blocked and hijacked by militias, the vital highway is the main connector between Libyan cities.
There are those who are obstructing the opening of the coastal road. We will declare their names, identities and the groups they belong to in the next meeting, in preparation to implement the Libyan people's desire to open that important road. Some militias, however, are asking for an outrageous 260 million dinar ransom to allow a regular flow of vehicles on the road.
The main focus in the country is on opening the coastal road. This road connects all the Libyan coastal cities together. It is a step in the freedom of movement in the country. The road is now a symbol of restoring confidence between rival factions and unifying the country.
The joint task force leading security confrontations with the militias standing in the way of reopening the coastal road could avoid further complications to the fragile ceasefire.
The Libyan military task force is the first attempt to test whether rival Libyans can work together under one command. Its success is not only important to restore security in central Libya, it will be an indication that Libyans are finally ready to unite their military. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, more than 100 children, most without their parents, were intercepted off the coast of Libya this past week. That's according to the United Nations Children's Fund. Dangerous overseas crossing attempts to reach Europe has left over 1,000 foreign children in detention centers in Libya. Yasser Hakim spoke with UNICEF regional spokesperson Juliet Tuma about the latest efforts to deal with the migrant crisis.
We do know that there are many migrants in Libya, among them many children, and most of them are living in detention centers under very, very harsh conditions, with very limited access to basic services, including water and hygiene, let alone health and education. And what we are saying is that the Libyan authorities should, first of all, release all migrant children from detention and refugee children as well, because the detention of migrants and refugees should not happen. Putting children in detention centers is not a solution. I mean, these children have not done anything wrong, or certainly haven't committed crimes, and so putting them in detention should not happen. And in fact, they should be released.
Has the UNICEF and the international community done enough to solve this problem?
This is a caseload of children that UNICEF has been following for many years now with regards to migrants and refugees in Libya. We are committed to helping the Libyan government in providing services to those children while they're in detention, but ideally when they get out of detention. And it's not just the responsibility of the Libyan authorities alone, it's the responsibilities of the Europeans, all the countries who are on the central Mediterranean should also help trace those children who come to their shores to rescue them, because the journey is one of the deadliest in the world.
What is being done by the UNICEF to try and reunite the children with their families?
For us, it was any child is a child too many, but 114 is a huge number, and unaccompanied as well. These are the vulnerable of the vulnerable. Try to track down those children's mothers, fathers, any first-hand relatives. So yes, that is something that is ongoing. Whether we would be successful or not, I don't know. It is premature to say. Meanwhile, we will continue to focus on helping these children. The children have arrived indeed to Sicily, and they are being assisted there not only by UNICEF but also by local authorities.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Over in South Africa, the suspended Secretary General of the African National Congress, Ace Magashule, has this weekend been booted out of a meeting of the party's top officials. This comes amid an increasingly open power struggle in the governing ANC party. Magashule had attended the meeting in defiance of his suspension after being charged with corruption. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The governing ANC is dealing with a deeply divided and factional organization. Even the top six of the leadership is evidently at loggerheads. In a bid to fight entrenched corruption in the governing party, over a month ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa warned that any ANC members and leaders facing corruption charges would also face suspension if they did not step aside or leave their posts within 30 days. One of those facing corruption charges is the party's Secretary General, Ace Magashule. Magashule refused to step aside after the stipulated days, denying the corruption allegations. He was then suspended. In defiance, Magashule hit back and said he had instead suspended President Ramaphosa. Magashule then further forced his way into a virtual meeting of the National Executive Committee of the ANC despite his suspension. He was then booted out. Many observers say the party is in full crisis mode.
It's not a new crisis, it's just in the continuum of crisis that the ANC has found itself in. As you would know, organizations are always faced with the difficult question as to whether or not they acted too late. And I think that's the biggest test the ANC is facing. Did they let go of principle for so long that now that they are trying to restore, renew, and rebuild the organization anew, it might just be that it might be the undoing of the organization simply because they've left it too late to act.
Nguni, however, believes that the party will likely survive this standoff.
Look, the ANC will survive the crisis, whether it will make it out of this crisis intact or highly divided with a faction that may eventually find itself opting to, leave the ANC and form a new organization is something that has to be seen. Whenever there has been a moment like this one of highly, decorated leaders of the organization being suspended or expelled and so on, it tends to follow that they want to go and find a political home elsewhere.
The ANC governing alliance partners have expressed deep concern about the ongoing crisis in the party.
The issue is whether the ANC will be able to overcome the situation. And our answer is that with the overwhelming support of its members who want the ANC to overcome the situation, with the overwhelming support of the alliance partners, because we want the ANC to overcome the situation, and with the overwhelming support of members of the public who are not members of the ANC, but when we go to the ballot, they vote for the ANC. With their support, the ANC will be able to overcome the situation.
Ace Magashule is one of the ANC's top 6 officials. He also runs day-to-day affairs in the party. Yolisa Njamala for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
All right, so it's time now to catch up with the day's business news. Let's get the latest from Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Zimbabwe to increase local medicine production from under 20% to 60% in 5 years. And Egypt to build the largest petrochemicals plant in the region in the Red Sea Economic Zone.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Zimbabwe. The country is to increase local medicine production from under 20% to 60% in 5 years. Now, of course, the country approved a 5-year strategy to scale up a local manufacturing of pharmaceutical drugs. The government is targeting to raise local production capacity to 60% by 2025. Currently, about 80% of drugs available in the country are imported through private pharmacies or health development partners. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya with the details.
George Chagonda has come to the Epilepsy Support Foundation to collect a monthly batch of free drugs for his teenage son who suffers from epileptic seizures. The donated medication is often inadequate.
Sometimes I can only get one type of medication, yet my son needs 2 types. So I have to try to find the other one myself. Pharmacies are now selling in US dollars, which makes them harder to afford.
The bulk of medicines available in Zimbabwe are imported because local production has been progressively whittled down by years of economic distress.
Currently, I think about 20% of the national drug requirements are being met by local industries. But again, they are still reeling.
That may change with the implementation of an ambitious pharmaceutical development strategy, which will be financed by a $45 million revolving fund that manufacturers can tap into.
What the industry is asking for is long-term funding, 5 to 10 years, at concessionary interest rates, which is payable over a period of 5 to 10 years. And it is very important to have that money available because the funding that is available from commercial banks is short-term and the interest rates of about 40% and above. And that is not conducive for any meaningful investment. So what we're asking for is what has been done, for example, in agriculture, what has been done in mining, and have the same facility available for the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry.
Beyond capitalizing the drug makers, the strategy also aims to increase the availability of critical raw materials.
It means the millers have to be capacitated and equipped to actually start making cornstarch, which is pharmaceutical grade. Same thing with our sugar refineries. They actually need to refine the sugar to pharmaceutical grade. So it's the feeder industries and those who feed into this into the raw material supply will need to ramp up their strategies and to actually start thinking that we are working at pharmaceutical production.
Linkages with local universities will be created to undertake research and development that will ensure the industry keeps up with medical advancements. Restoring Zimbabwe's pharmaceutical production capacity is not only good for the economy, it's also a public health imperative that will help the country manage disease burdens, including HIV/AIDS, malaria, and increasingly prevalent non-communicable diseases. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Meanwhile, Egypt has signed a $7.5 billion contract to construct one of the largest petrochemicals complexes in Africa and the Middle East region. Now, authorities in Cairo say the complex will be built by the state-owned Red Sea National Refining and Petrochemicals Company, and it will be located in the Suez Canal Economic Zone. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with more on that report.
The project, over 3.56 million square meters, is meant to meet the needs for petroleum products. Cairo has been encouraged to go ahead after its huge natural gas discoveries in the last few years.
This industry is based on the raw material extracted from natural gas. We used to import petroleum products before, but after big discoveries such as the Zor gas field and many other fields, natural gas has become abundant. So we thought of putting added value to this raw material by establishing petrochemical plants. Ethylene, polyethylene, polypropylene, butane, benzene are to be produced. These products are in demand worldwide and could be used in various industries, whether large or medium enterprises.
The new factory will also help bridge the gap between producing and consuming petroleum products in Egypt. The North African country spends approximately $9.5 billion per year pre-COVID to import these chemicals.
The petrochemicals complex will provide about 4 million tons of added value petroleum products annually. We consume about 3.1 million tons a year. This means we will benefit first by saving a huge import bill and being self-sufficient. Secondly, we will export the surplus to create revenue that will exceed $8 billion a year. We're talking about this complex alone, but we're building another petrochemicals factory in Alamein, North Coast, that will produce another 1 million tons a year.
It will also create about 17,000 direct and indirect job opportunities. Egypt had earlier signed 9 deals with international firms worth $1 billion for oil and gas exploration in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. The completion date of the petrochemicals complex has not been announced yet. However, all these projects are meant to elevate the North African country to become a main energy hub in the region. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, Ethiopia has begun promoting its workforce to international companies and as an alternative to outsourcing jobs to countries such as India. The government initiative puts digital employment at the heart of its jobs strategy and represents a new trend in Africa, which is marketing its young digitally savvy job seekers to multinational corporations who are looking for cheaper labor abroad. CGTN's Coletta Wanjoe reports from Addis Ababa.
As the evening sets in Addis Ababa, this team starts to work. Their schedule is dictated by time zones in America and Singapore, because that is where most of their clients are based.
We're hiring almost every single day, and the other tech companies I know about are doing the same. So we're increasing quickly. So I think if any industry can provide a vast amount of jobs for the youth, it's the tech industry.
Young people are the driving force behind this company of some 100 people.
Pretty much everyone we hire is straight out of university. So we usually hire them as interns, and the ones who do the best, which is pretty much all of them, are very, very capable. We ended up taking them, hiring them, we do training for them, and then within a few months they're able to handle the client workload.
Such digital initiatives are being promoted by the Ethiopian Jobs Creation Commission, which wants more Ethiopians to set up such companies so as to ease the unemployment burden of about 2 million people.
That's a massive undertaking, right? If you, as a country, believe that You know, even working with the private sector and all of those things, you can do those things with the magic bullet. It's a bit difficult. So that's why we're really trying to inject technology and entrepreneurship. Technology, why? Because it kind of gives you that inflection point so that, you know, you're not looking at things linearly in terms of jobs creation.
The commission set up by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in 2018 to address growing unemployment is giving itself a 6-month target to support willing citizens to open businesses and employ others. The campaign is called Nkopa, which in Amharic means gold ore.
We're trying to start a trend so that slowly you have other financial instruments who are looking at this and say, hey, this is actually beneficial, right? And so why don't we also invest in the PE aspect, in the VC, like the pure VC aspect, right? Because here it's really a blended finance type of instrument. We're going to have also a grant facility for de-risking, and we'll have also even maybe a concessional loan facility. So it's not easy. It's not easy to address these issues, these challenges, because you're looking at a very specific type of challenges that startups are going through. But you know, we have to start somewhere.
But internet penetration, a major requirement for such digital enterprises, remains low at about only 20%. The government is looking at the liberalization of its telecom sector as part of the solution to the less internet penetration. It is targeting to license 3 international companies to be part of the sector, where Ethio Telecom, a state-owned company, has enjoyed monopoly for decades. Companies like MMCY that have already penetrated the international market say daily requests for Ethiopian software developers are pouring in, and they believe there is more than enough opportunity for Ethiopian businesses to grow. Coletta Onjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, China marked its Brand Day on Monday, May the 10th. CGTN's Lu Sirio spoke with a number of Chinese firms who not only survived but thrived despite a difficult 2020 to understand how they turned obstacles into opportunities.
With the coronavirus pandemic hitting the global economy hard, some see a glimmer of hope. Midea, China's leading household electronic devices company, says it still witnessed more than 10% growth in 2020. The company says innovation is a core driver.
So we have already applied more than 120,000 patents worldwide just last year. And also we are the #1 in terms of patents grant in the last 5 years worldwide. The result of the investments are a series of innovative products.
Most of Midea's overseas markets are centered in Japan, US, Germany, and Italy, but these nations are among the hardest hit by the pandemic. Eric Wang says a balanced global manufacturing layout has helped the company to survive.
Currently, we have 34 manufacturing bases, and half of them, that's 17 manufacturing bases, are outside of China. So when the China supply chain is in constraints, we can utilize our overseas factories to supply the demand used to be supplied from China. And after the overseas supply chain was disrupted, we fully utilized the Chinese capacity to supply the rest of the world.
Many young companies have seen a boom during the pandemic, thanks to help from big data. Wellland, which produces smart health devices, is one of them. Its revenue in 2020 is 2 times that of 2019. They attribute this achievement to partner Alibaba Design Innovation Center, whose parent company Alibaba has millions of active users online. They say the center helped them better understanding of customers and customer preferences to better build their brand.
We used to do original and trusted manufacturing, export-oriented trade, and get orders from overseas. Generally, customers tell us they want certain types of products and decide how much they want to pay for the design, but after building our own brand, we control the design and price of the product.
We help our customers design more efficiently, reducing the cost of product innovation, so as to get rid of price competition. We hope to help turn made in China into created in China.
Industry insiders say China has a long history of manufacturing, and with the improvements in industrial design and customer understanding, it won't be long until the country grows more competitive. Lu Sirui, CGTN, Guangzhou.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, Uganda engages the International Monetary Fund for another loan. We'll be taking a closer look at the country's debt stock. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead. Tunisian TV series highlights the plight of illegal migrants.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
A new Tunisian television series called Harga, which means irregular migration in North African dialect, has attracted millions of viewers. The show aired during the Islamic holy month of Ramadan and shed light on the issue of irregular migration from Tunisia and Africa to Italy.
Harga depicts the stories of men, women and children, as well as elderly people of all origins and nationalities, who risk their lives to reach European shores. These irregular migrants who resort to services provided by profit-seeking smugglers could face death, deportation, prison, or human trafficking.
We're trying to answer the following question. Why do people resort to irregular migration? Is it a search for better economic and social conditions? Is it because people no longer belong to their homeland? Is it an identity crisis? Is the aftermath of the sea crossing and risky journey an easy road to paradise, or a mere illusion which leads to death at sea or inhumane treatment and humiliation? This reality makes people regret, and there's no turning back.
Director Lesad Lousleti says fiction and reality intertwine in the 20-episode TV series. Harga tells the story of irregular migrants. It is also a tribute to the families who lost their sons or daughters in the Mediterranean.
The families of lost migrants are present in this series as actors. The best actors cannot feel what the parents are feeling. This work is a mixture and combination of documentary and fiction at the level of the story and the technique.
In 2017, Fathiya's son attempted to cross the Mediterranean to reach the Italian island of Lampedusa. The boat carrying the young man and dozens of irregular migrants had broken down. All people on board the makeshift vessel were reported missing.
I want my son back. I don't feel alive since he crossed the sea. I want to know his whereabouts. I'm sick. I don't sleep at night. I want my son back. The government and the whole world should listen to me and bring him back.
Tunisian, Libyan, Algerian, Moroccan and Sub-Saharan actors, as well as actors from Italy, are the main characters in Harga. The series will be available in different languages and on several streaming services in the next few months. According to the International Organization for Migration, hundreds of deaths are recorded each year on the main Mediterranean sea routes to Europe. Harga, the Ramadan TV series, shows the danger of irregular migration and explains the root causes of this international phenomenon. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Coming up in sports. Kenya continues preparations for the Under-20 World Championships.